Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Budget and Finance Committee for April 9th, 2018. I'm Paul Krikorian, joined by my colleagues, Mr. Blumenfield and Mr. Kretz, and we're ready to begin with today's agenda. I have Mr. Previn is our only multi-item speaker as far as I can see. So, Mr. Previn, if you'd like to come up now and first take your 2 minutes on agenda items. And then I'll do general public comments separately, but I just like to separate them. So,
good. Separator. Fair enough. It's Eric Previn from the Studio City area, CD2, and you've got a case in which Holly S. Brakefield had an injury on a sidewalk in Hollywood. There's a case where, unfortunately, Graciela Herrera lost her son in a LAPD-related taser gone wrong and then shooting. And finally, we are freeing up $455,000 to the firm of Pepper Hamilton, which, as Koretz will remind, it's a firm that's defending the city because all over the city people were submitting false claims for federal money to do ADA-like things, and Mei Ling sued, and then it's my understanding that the U.S. attorney has jumped in to that lawsuit, adding credibility. And of course, false claims pay treble damages, so no good tragedy should go to waste. They've spent, this firm, it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, first it was $100,000, then $600,000, and then we're over $1.1 million for that firm. So that's a lot since December of 2017. I hope I have that wrong and someone would correct me. I'm really upset about that. The Graciela Herrera case is heartbreaking because you have a kid, 26 years old, allegedly with bipolar, not treated because not so crazy, and by his home and taken into custody, and then at UCLA it went awry in the emergency room and they tased him. It didn't work. He picked up a bench or a stool, and then he was shot and I believe killed, I think. And that's just horrible. And the last one, Brakefield, you know, Mr. Englander was trying to make a little smoke and mirrors out of. I don't know the exact details other than on New Year's Eve, Mr. Blumenfield, they were heading to a nightclub, piggyback, over some disrupted sidewalk, tripped and fell, and Englander speculated it might be $3 million to KNX. We don't know. We certainly hope not. And we do want people to be restored where we're negligent, obviously, but we have to do something different. I think we all agree that we're dead in the water if we're paying out huge sums to folks who are partially liable. I'm thinking of the Godefroy case and others. And you want me to come back on general public comment?
In just a few seconds. You can stay seated if you'd like.
Oh.
So that will close public comment on items 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. And yes, if you'd like to go ahead with your general public comment now, Mr. Previn.
Sure. I note that we're looking at parking occupancy taxes on the agenda. I didn't get a chance to squeeze it in, but you know, parking is a great concern, and I know I've been chasing the Department of Transportation, Mr. Corrin, if you could instruct them to just simply comply with the Public Record Act by providing, if they provided notices to the community along Ventura Boulevard for the preferential parking district number 276, if they've done that, if they've done an advertisement that I believe is required, Mr. Kretz, if you could just ask Seleta Reynolds. She's a decent person. I think we all know. We're working closely with them as we shovel money into Vision Zero from street services to try to get, you know, some sanity into our streets. So if there's any way that they could provide that information, they're meeting all over my district. I've reached out to Mr. Bernician, who is doing an outstanding job of getting the budget ready, but I don't think that this has landed on his desk because Mr. Hale is whispering during the meeting, and he knows that we're going to get it eventually, and that it will be clear and that people will understand what's happening. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there any other general public comment?
No, sir.
None. General public comment is closed. All right, members, I would recommend items 4 item 4 for consent approval, and item 6 I would recommend noting and filing on consent unless you have questions about either of those matters or concerns. Seeing none, that will be the action of the committee on items 4 and 6. We'll now go into our closed session, beginning with items, unless there's a need for priority, we'll just go in numerical order. All right. We're back in open session now and ready to hear item number 5.
Good afternoon. Robert Lee,
Pardon me, Mr. Chair, would you like that item read into the record?
Okay.
Sorry. Item number 5 is Office of Finance report relative to implementation of recommendations from the Controller's 2012 audit of the parking occupancy tax program.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Afternoon. Robert Lee, Office of Finance. I'm here regarding the motion to the report back regarding the Controller's 2012 audit regarding the parking occupancy tax program and the 13 recommendations that Office of Finance implemented in order to address the issues that came about from the Controller's audit. Regarding that, is there any specific questions, or would you like me to go through the entire?
Go right ahead.
Okay. So for alcohol-related CUBs, the planning department sometimes imposes parking requirements, off-site parking, valet, as conditions for approval. Does the planning and finance have a system for tracking these conditions, which can be a clue to finding the new operators? Should we have such a system? Is that addressed at all?
No. The specifics of this audit was regarding what the Office of Finance was doing regarding parking occupancy tax, and whether we were collecting it and making sure that it was remitted in a timely manner. The issues were that there was issues as to what information we collected and what additional information was recommended by controllers. So what this Office of Finance did was, during the fiscal year of 2013-14, we implemented the POT Auto Park Bond Program. And the premise of the bond was to, on an annual basis, review all the existing parking occupancy operators within the city of Los Angeles to make sure that they were meeting their information, as well as implementing a bond on the basis that if they were delinquent in paying their taxes, there was a methodology for the Office of Finance to go after any delinquencies through the surety company, as well as we go forward when auditing, that we have the ability to at least pull the funds from that, the revenue that's supposed to come to the city from that.
I guess my question is getting at, are we actually finding, do we know where all the parking spaces are and where all the parking lots are? And that's why, I have a couple of questions related to that in terms of how we find, in order for the audit to be valid, we need to actually be surveying.
Yes, one of the things what we're doing now as part of the report back is the fact that we're working with Pondera. The purpose of them is they're working with online operators that I can't speak with regarding entities that work with POTs. Otherwise, if you go online and you want to park inside the city, these entities would be able to direct you toward which lots are open and what information is there. So we're mining those locations. We're looking to see if it's within the City of Los Angeles database, and if they aren't, we pursue that. If they are, the requirements from the POT on an annual basis, we check with the ones that are already within the system to make sure that they are reporting correctly, that they're reporting any new entities locations. Another thing that we're also doing is we're working with CID, and the premise is any auto park that comes to the city that applies for a new parking occupancy permit, police permit, they are required, the inspectors will check with the Office of Finance to make sure that all their existing accounts are not delinquent, and then they proceed from that to apply for the new permit.
Just as we're doing that, we should be looking at when the planning department imposes parking requirements, and we know that all these restaurants and things that get the CUBs are creating parking.
Yes. What we can do is we can follow up with the planning department and see what we can do regarding that aspect of it. One of the parameters with parking is that with the Office of Finance and the POT, it has to be at least 8 lots or more, or parking spaces or more.
Right.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to regulate.
Well, and that also goes to when we require parking operators to report on the number of spaces, is that the actual number of striped spaces or the actual capacity?
It's the capacity. Otherwise, as part of the bond application that was part of this, it requests to see exactly how many spaces they do have.
So for valet lots, a lot of times the capacity is a lot bigger than the striped spaces, right?
Yes. We would be only concerned with the business tax revenue from the spaces. We wouldn't dictate the size of the spaces. That we would leave up to the parking,
I'm sorry, you wouldn't dictate
the spaces or the size of the spaces.
Yeah, I'm not talking about that, but I'm saying you have a restaurant that may have 6, 7 spots on site, but they have a valet. And I can think of a million restaurants like this. And the valet, then, they're going to take in a heck of a lot more than the 8 cars. Therefore, they should fall under this parking audit. We should be getting tax from them. But I have a sneaking suspicion that a lot of them are getting away with the less than 8 thing because they only have a couple of spaces on site.
We can look into it and do a little bit more research, but if it's 8 or more, they're usually associated with a parking entity, and they do the valet services for them as a management service. But we can look into it a little more.
Okay. And then the cash issue. Do you know what percentage of the business is done in cash, and is this changing? Do the audits focus more on the cash operations?
Audits, we don't specifically focus on cash. As you know, most of this is a cash business. However, with one of the exemptions that came about last year or the year before, is that if these POTs have the ability or are allowing their customers the ability to pay by credit card, they're being exempted. As a result of that, probably about 25% of the POT bonds became exempted from the POT operator locations became exempt because they do allow that option. But, yeah.
And have we looked into the ride sharing? Is that cutting into the parking revenue? Is there a way to analyze whether some of the change in reported revenue is due to ride sharing or is legitimate, or whether it's made up?
Well, on the ride sharing and the parking, they usually don't use the parking locations. So you're saying that if...
I'm saying that could be an explanation for why revenue may be down in certain locations.
True. There's also the aspect that there's a lot of locations downtown that as we develop, we're losing some of those parking spaces.
Right. And where and do we check when downtown, when a surface lots are being developed, or when a parking lot goes offline or disappears, that parking need doesn't disappear. It goes somewhere. Do we track it in terms of where it's going?
If it's an actual parking lot, we can track it. But if it's an entity that's going into the shared economy, other than if we're following up with the shared economy, no, we wouldn't have any ability to track that.
Okay. Well, on the first two, I'd be curious about the answers to those.
Mr. Kress?
Now, my understanding is that the parking lot industry is becoming more tax compliant and that receipts from parking lots are actually up. Can you give us an idea of what the actual numbers are in terms of difference since this audit period started?
Apologies, I don't have any specific numbers regarding the revenue increases on this issue. But you are correct that with the auto bond and the annual renewal of the bond and the fact that now, because if they don't pay, the surety companies that are backing them up are stuck with responsibility, that they are compliant, at least with the delinquency and the reporting on a monthly basis of the POT. But revenue, specific numbers, increase-wise, unfortunately, I don't have it.
How can you get that to us at
Sure.
sometime in the near future? So it would be good to know how much success we're having in terms of dollars. Also, I know a couple of recommendations in the audit deal with improving technologies. Can you give us an idea of what you're thinking of in terms of improving technologies?
Well, what we're doing right now is we're working with Pondera. What they do is they collect data from third parties, and they're using that data to match against our existing database to see if there's anything that doesn't exist. And that is a focus for our discovery. Otherwise, we're following up to see if these entities are out there. And if they're not, we're providing the non-compliance, and we're making sure that they come into compliance.
So we're just talking about using their technologies to help track down non-compliant parking lots?
Yes, otherwise, they are looking at entities online that that they have access to, or they're working to have access to, and they're comparing that with what we have within our database to see if there are any new entities that are out there that we can track. And one of the things that they're assisting us with is we are building a site map, so that we can understand within the context where are these possible entities that might not be in our database.
Mr. Hernandez? You touched upon the one issue that I wanted to ask you about. That is the move to encourage more credit card utilization and reduce the proportion of cash in the business. And I don't remember the exact chronology, but we had the bonding requirement, and then we gave relief from the bonding requirement to operators who took only credit cards. Was that it? And
That at least offered the ability to pay by credit card.
only offered the ability.
Yeah.
So they
Yeah.
could still take 99% cash and 1% credit card and still get the relief from the bonding requirement.
Yes.
Well, that, maybe we should rethink that, but okay. That's
They've been in
another
compliance
issue.
since then. No, we did a deep dive in this in public safety, so sorry about that. I was going to cover it, but I didn't know if everybody followed that. Those are ones that weren't in compliance at all, and not filing, and so you're now showing that we have 100% compliance.
Yes.
That was the difference. But the cash part is another issue.
Well, we have no idea if there's 100% compliance if it's a cash business, though.
Well, they weren't even, no. That's the difference between, okay, so to split here, because we spent years on this in public safety, and I probably should have kicked a lot of it to budget too. Compliance meaning that they're actually even submitting their taxes, they're paying their POT, they're doing, so a lot of companies weren't even doing that at all.
Yeah.
And the bigger players that actually take credit cards weren't the ones we were ever really having issues with. They were the smaller ones, and they're not set up for credit cards at all. But yeah, the sooner we get the cash out of the business completely, I totally agree.
So I guess just that's preliminary to the question, which was if, since we made that change to encourage more operators to go to credit card utilization, have we seen related to that an increase in the revenues from those operators?
No. At this point, regarding the bond, this 2017, 16-17 renewal period would be the first one that they were exempt from.
Okay, so you can't really do a comparison yet.
So at this point, they were exempt. We are in the process of reviewing to make sure that they're exempt. But other than that, we don't have the specifics. We'll have to wait another year or two.
Okay. And forgive me if it's in here. I don't remember seeing it when I looked at the report. But another big issue we had with some of the operators was after they were in non-compliance for years, and after we chased them down, finally, they would disappear, and then a new company with remarkably similar makeup would be formed under a new name and would begin to. So what are we doing to vet that and prevent that from happening?
On some things like that, we can't really prevent. What we can do is, in the past, like you said, if an entity was in place for a long time and we audited them and we had an idea that they had liabilities, they would just bankrupt, change legal ownership and whatnot. However, at this point, the bankruptcy option is always still there for them. I mean, there are ways around, but the thing is with the surety company and the fact that they are bonded,
Yeah.
when we audit them and we find that their numbers are not the right amount, their flexibility as to pay or not pay is a lot more limited. Otherwise, if an assessment is going out on an audit, it goes to both the surety as well as the operator. And the surety, to protect their bond, invariably would rather pay for it as opposed, and then discuss it with the operator as to how to collect it. So from that point of view, it is to our advantage.
Okay. Anything else, members? We had one speaker, Michael Karsh. Want to
Yes.
provide your comments, sir?
Thank you very much. I'm with Ken Spiker and Associates. It's a pleasure to be before your committee. Also a pleasure to be before Richard Williams. He used to work with me when I was in the CLA's office. I enjoyed all of his work. The Los Angeles Parking Lot Association, LAPA, is a client of ours, and we have worked with them to work together with the Department of Finance over the last many years. We think that our only concern is that this report came out and was available on Friday afternoon. We would appreciate it if your committee would allow us to have a week or two to review it with all of our members, and then we could meet again. We could have our first meeting with Claire Bartels and the Department of Finance. As far as I know, there's no problem with the report, but I would appreciate it if you would indulge us with this continued time to look at it.
Members, I don't see any reason not to hold this in committee for a week. Is there? I mean, there's no time-sensitive action that needs to be taken, right? So we'll hold it in committee. Oh, we're dark. This is our last meeting.
Oh, yeah, we go into.
Okay.
We go into the fun time.
Well, I'll tell you what we'll do then, because we're going to be busy with the city's budget from here on out. So what we can do is ask that this. Well, we're just noting and filing it.
Yeah, what do you need it?
Yeah, so we're noting and filing the report. After you have a chance to review it, if you have concerns, you can come back to us or the Public Safety Committee with any concerns that there may be. I think
That's
that. Yeah,
That's
okay.
good. Thank you.
All right. So then, without objection, it'll be the action of the committee to note and file the report with our thanks. Members, I would like to ask that we reconsider item number 4, and the recommendation. Just need to slightly amend the recommendation on item number 4 so that the instruction.
Sir, I can.
Oh, do you have?
I can give you language.
Please, go ahead. Rather than me ad-libbing it, I trust your
Item number 4 is the city attorney report relative to additional funding and term extensions for outside counsel. The first recommendation on this report includes a transfer from the unappropriated balance outside counsel line item. It's come to our attention after you approved it that the amount available in this line item is less than the amount that was requested for transfer. Therefore, we'd like to recommend that you change the first recommendation in this report from transfer $575,391 from the unappropriated balance outside counsel, including workers' compensation line item, to the City Attorney Fund 100, Department number 12, account number 009301, and instead change that recommendation to read transfer the balance of the unappropriated balance outside counsel, including workers' compensation line item, up to $575,391 to the City Attorney Fund 100, Department number 12, account number 009301.
Okay. So if there's no objection, to that amendment, it'll be the action of the committee to approve the item as amended. And is there any other business before the committee?
Mr. Chair, would you like to also reconsider number 6 now that Councilmember Englander is present?
Yes, let's reconsider item number 6, which has been proposed for consent approval, to note and file that item. And it will be the unanimous judgment of the committee to note and file that item. So thank you, Mr. Williams. And if there's no other business before the committee, we are adjourned.